and welcome to this week's Tea with Fee. I'm Fee and welcome to Make It So HQ. Grab yourself a drink or something and then let's get chatting about what's going on this week. Fantastic. So it's another week has gone by and I just thought I would give you a little update on what's been happening at Make It So HQ. So Betty Blue is making progress. Some more backstitch has happened and I feel like I am finally getting somewhere with that. So I'm really pleased with how the progress is going. It's slow, but when I do pick it up, I feel like I am getting fairly big bits done. So I'm quite pleased with that. This month's box pattern and boxes have all been posted out for the members. And I, this month, did a email for the first time to everybody, and that included the unboxing video, the making masterclass video and the pattern, and they went out to everybody. So that's been well received so far, which is fantastic. And this month we are actually making a drawstring bag with a plastic see-through window, and the skills that will be learned doing that are dealing with the plastic, hiding all the seams and inserting the drawstring channel. So I'm really excited to see how everybody gets on with that and getting to see everybody's makes in the group chat. So that's been really exciting. The other thing that's happening in Make It So at the minute is it's year end, and because I've got a bit of a mini shop going on for my sewing ladies, I have to do a stock take. So my mini shop is slightly bigger than I realised. I had my lovely friends Hazel and Sharon round, who are also crafty people like me, and they were round on Friday, last Friday, and I kind of said to them before they got here, I said, look, I need to do a bit of a stock take. Do you fancy helping me? I know that's not what they were coming round for, but I said, do you want to give me a hand? And both of them were quite keen to get involved, and what we established was that I have a lot more stuff than I realised. I am not quite sure what the final count on was for zips, but I remember last year thinking I've got way more zips than I need, and I think this year the figure is higher than last year. So they were absolutely fantastic at helping me last Friday. It's not quite finished yet. However, I'm hoping that my lovely friends Sarah and Anna, who I am seeing later this evening, will be possibly willing to assist with the rest of the stock take. And Anna and Sarah were very good because they actually helped me make up all the advent calendars in November last year. So I have form, but I will pre-ask how they feel about it. But anyway, so what I have still to stock take is, I don't know if you can see it from there, this basket is embroidery stuff and ribbon and webbing that needs to be counted, and then this bookcase here is basically all fabric which needs to get measured. So I did try, I don't know if you can see here, I did try this time last year. So when I did my stock take last year, which was the first time I needed to do a stock take, I thought to myself, right, I need to get smarter at this for next year because I don't want to be having to count everything. Anyway, it kind of didn't work. So I thought I would do what they do in the fabric shops, and I'd have little labels on things, and as I used the fabric, I would write down what had been taken off. And in a perfect world that would work. However, because it's normally whilst we're in the middle of a sewing class, I'm trying to get it done as quickly as possible so that I can get back to the helping, that I forget to update the little cards, and some of the little cards have fallen off. So I need a better system. But anyway, so that is what's happening in Make It So at the minute. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was my top 10 sewing items for anybody that's getting started, and also my 5 top tips for sitting down to sew. So I thought that I would share those with you today. Now, I've just noticed behind me, I know we're in April, and I've got an advent calendar behind me. But whilst I was sorting out the stuff that needed to be stock taked, I realised that I had this advent calendar for my friend Julie, who asked me if I would sew the pockets on for her. So depending on how long this takes, we might end up doing a bit of that whilst we chat, but we'll just wait and see how long it takes me to work through what I wanted to talk to you about today. So I'm going to go and do that now, and then we're going to have a little chat about my top 10 sewing items. Okay, let's talk top 10 sewing items that you need when you're about to start a new project. They're not in any particular order. They're just as I thought of them, and I've gone for 10, and these are the things that I think that you need for every project that you're going to do. And they don't include the pattern or the fabric because they're a given, okay? So they're not including those, but the general kind of what's in your sewing bag items, that's what we're going to talk about just now. So the first one is sewing machine needles. So depending on the project that you're working on will depend on what needle that you're going to use. You don't use the same needle for all projects, and really you should change the needle for every project. And if you think about it, if you've gone to the expense to buy yourself some nice fabric, possibly paid for a pattern, which aren't cheap either, why then compromise your sewing journey by keeping an old rubbishy needle in your machine because you've just not thought about changing it, or you think it'll do? So you need to think about what needle you've got in, switch them out regularly, preferably every project. However, I have got to sew literally a square here and a square here, and then that's this project finished. I'm not going to then bin that needle after I've done those 2 squares. So think about realistically how much sewing you have done with the needle, okay? And I just wanted to highlight to you that there's loads of different needle choices, so you need to think about which needle you're going to use. So these are jeans, quilting, super stretch, super universal, hem stitch, more jeans, top stitch, stretch, metallic, leather, stretch, twin, overlocker, jersey, smaller twin, and then these are a bulk buy. And that's not even all of them. That's all the ones that I had. But so as you can see, there are lots of different needles. Pick the needle that you need for your project. As a rule, universal 80 if you're just going to sew. If you're literally just sewing quilter's cotton, 2 layers together, universal 70-80 should be fine. If you're going for something that's thicker, possibly try a jeans needle because it'll go through better because it's a sharper point. If you're going to quilt something, use a quilting needle. So yeah, have a think. The needles are not hugely expensive. You get 5 in a pack. You can go multi-size or you can get all the same size. So if you know, once you've been sewing for a while and you realise, actually I go through quite a lot of this particular size, then just buy those packs just with that number. Or you can buy this size pack, which is 100. So these are universal 80s, and there's 100 in that pack, and they're cheaper to buy like that than they are to buy a pack of 5. If you worked it out, how many 20 packs of 5 would be dearer than this. So yeah, needles are important. So that is my first suggestion of things that you need to have. You need to have a selection of them, okay? Item number 2 are bobbins, and they are followed by thread. So we'll talk about them together. So I tend to go-to thread is Gutermann's because it just always works for me. I tend to go Gutermann sew-all thread, and I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So Gutermann's thread comes like this. It doesn't actually say on the bottom of it that it's the sew-all one, but it's this kind of creamy colour, and these are the 100-metre reels, and that's the one that I tend to go for most of the time. Now, the different coloured plastic means that it's a different type of thread, okay? So this is what's called top stitch thread, which you can see there quite easily that that is a lot thicker than that. And this is used for top stitching. So you need to think about what thread you're going to buy for the project that you're doing. But my go-to is Gutermann sew-all. And then that leads on to bobbins. Make sure you're using the right bobbin for your machine. Not all machines take the same bobbins. A lot of the machines take these plastic bobbins. So your Janome and your Brother and the Singer machines all kind of take these plastic ones. Check your instructions because you actually get different depth of these plastic bobbins, and if you've gone for one that's not deep enough, it will bounce around in the actual mechanism of the machine, and that will affect your tension. So make sure you're using the right bobbin. You also get metal bobbins, and a lot of the machines that use metal bobbins need a metal bobbin because there's a magnet in there and it needs the metal to make it work properly and for the tension to work properly as well. So you need to use the right bobbin for your machine. I'm currently using a new Bernina machine at the minute, and the bobbins on that are massive. Like, they're about this size. So that's like an exception to the rule. Generally speaking, the bobbins are the size of the ones that I've showed you. And what I also try to do is I will wind the bobbin with the same thread. So depending on your sewing journey, and if you plan to, if you think you're hooked on sewing, I would in theory potentially buy 2 of each colour of thread when you go to start your project. Use one to fill up the bobbin and the other one to put on the top of the machine for your top thread. And you not tend to use the same amount of top thread as bottom thread. So basically, when the top, if you've got 2 and you fill the bobbin with the second one, they should both run out at the same time. So that's another tip. So I tend to have my bobbin thread and my bobbin and my thread together to make it easier for me to actually find them, because sometimes the colours are quite close together. So you can buy these little boxes and put your bobbin threads in those. So as you can see, I do have some in there. However, I tend to now have them on my stand on the wall. And I tend to have the bobbin thread at the bottom, as you can see, and then the thread on the top of it, and the two of them fit together on the stand. And then it means that you can find them easily. So that's my tip on bobbins and thread. Item number 4, so that's us done 1, 2, 3 and 4. So 1, sewing machine needles. 2, the right bobbin. 3, the right thread for the project that you're working on. 4 are little scissors. Now, little scissors, I've got various different pairs. So I've got these little ones. You want the little scissors that you're using to have a really sharp point. And you know, sometimes you get scissors and they only cut down at the bottom. You need them to be sharp right up to the tip, because these are for cutting threads, or possibly for cutting really close to stitches without cutting the stitches. So therefore you need the points to be really sharp. So you definitely need at least 1 pair of those. I tend to have several pairs. And I've got this little sewing kit here, which has got a lot of my go-to things in it. So that is item number 4. Item number 5 on my top 10 sewing items is are pins. So these pins are in a pin cushion. You may or may not like a pin cushion. A lot of people just leave their pins in the packaging and then they just take them out and put them back in as and when they're finished with them. These are the ones that I like the best, and these are hemline glass head pins, and these ones are extra long. I really like these ones because if you need to iron anything, because they're glass head ones, they don't melt the iron or the pin, and neither of them melt onto the fabric, so that's really good. And they're quite sharp, and I just really like that particular one. So they are my favourite. And then also you might want some clips, and I've classed these as the same thing, pins or clips. You don't need to have both, and you could probably get away with one or the other, but I quite like the combination of the two. So they're a bit like clothes pegs or bulldog clips. So yeah, I really like these. So they are my number 5. Number 6, fabric scissors. So fabric scissors are important. You don't want anybody to be using your fabric scissors to cut open the mail or cut up cardboard boxes, because you'll get them blunt and then they won't work particularly well for your sewing. So make sure that your fabric scissors are under lock and key and are clearly labelled that they are not to be used for anything other than fabric. And I have got 2 pairs that I particularly like. I know I've mentioned it before, but being left-handed, you are a bit more limited to what you can use. So I go for universal handles because I can't get to grips with, now that you can get left-handed moulded handles, the blades go the wrong way to universal or right ones, and because I've used them for all this time, I can't get my eye into the blades moving the wrong way, so I just stick to universal. So these are Fiskars universal scissors, and these are spring loaded ones, so it literally is easier on your grip and your hands because it just bounces back. So I really like those. And I've also got these hemline, and they again universal grip, and I like these ones as well because my whole hand goes in them rather than a lot of the grips you can only get 3 fingers in. I quite like the fact that I can get all of my fingers in there, and they are a similar size as well. So they are my favourite fabric scissors. Okay, item number 7 is chalk, pens or fabric markers. So if you need to draw anything onto your fabric, you need to use fabric marker or chalk, tailor's chalk. And these are some of the ones that I recommend. So you should, where possible, you should always put the marks on the wrong side of the fabric, because it means that it is hidden. And ideally you want your marks to be where they're going to be hidden, seam allowances, etc. But sometimes that's not always possible. So the items that I tend to use the most are these erasable fabric pens, and these are basically not heat resistant. You iron them and the pen disappears. Or there's a little plastic bit on the end which is like a rubber, and then it's like friction and then it rubs off. So I particularly like these. I also like this So Easy pencil. It's a crayon and it's got 6 different colours, and you turn it round and then the colour comes out the end, like one of the pens that you used to have, and I can't get it to work at the minute, but you get the idea. So I like these 2 as well. And then I actually really like, I quite often just go back to bog standard tailor's chalk, and you can get that in various different colours. This particular set has got 3 different colours that came in it, and it came in this little plastic box, which is quite good. And I use those 3 interchangeably depending on what it is that I'm working on. So depending on the colour of the fabric you're working on will depend on what's to hand that will work for you. So it is quite a good idea to have a couple of different coloured options, not necessarily in the same format, but just have a couple of different colours on hand so that you've got something that will work for the fabric that you are going to be marking. Okay, item 8, rulers. Now, I've bunched these all together. It is one item, and depending on what your sewing setup is will depend on what's going to work for you. So you need something to measure things by. So tape measure, retractable tape measure, or a regular dressmaking tape measure works fine. And I also use these quilting rulers. So this one is, which you can barely see, this one is 12 inches by 6.5 inches wide, and this one is 24 inches by 6.5 inches wide, and I find these work together really well. You can use them just with your fabric on a table, but they also work really well if you've got a cutting mat and a rotary cutter, because the rotary cutter can then go against the side of the plastic ruler to cut the fabric. But these are the 3 things that I tend to use the most. So the big ruler, the little ruler, and the tape measure. I haven't put the cutting mat and rotary cutter down in my top 10 because not everybody, you don't need that to get started. It's quite a good add-in or addition. It's a good addition to your sewing kit, but it's not essential to get you going at the beginning. Item 9 is the seam ripper. I bet you were all wondering when that was going to turn up. And like I said, these are not in any particular order, but the seam ripper is essential to everybody's sewing bag. We all need one. It makes unpicking things a lot quicker, and there must be very few people in their sewing journey that can say that they've never unpicked anything. So you want to make that process as quick and easy as possible, and that's why you need one of these. I really like the ones that come with the machine. You get longer ones as well that you can buy independently, but I just always have been happy with the ones that come with the machine. Quite often there's a little red ball on the end here, but it's fallen off of this one, and that's to help if you want to do like a long continuous cut the stitches rather than just catching them one at a time. You can put your 2 pieces of fabric together like this and then run that right along them. I would just use caution when you do that, because I have done that in the past and ripped the fabric because I've got a little bit too cocky. So just be careful when you're doing that, especially if it's on something that you are really precious about and you don't have any backup plan. So I would just use that method carefully. The last item in my top 10 is a scrap bag, because keeping your sewing area tidy makes for a much pleasanter sewing journey, in my opinion. It means that all your mess is contained in the one place because you're putting it all in the scrap bag as you go. And we all end up with, like, this is what's in here at the minute, we all end up with all these little threads that we cut off all the time. So rather than just flinging them on the floor and then worrying about it later, and I mean I have been guilty of doing that myself in the past, but it is much easier if you just put them in the little scrap bag. And this is actually, depending on the machine that you've got, my original machines, my new machine's foot pedal's too big for this. However, if you've got a standard Janome or Brother or Singer sewing machine, then you'd probably find that the foot pedal fits in this, and you don't tend to get anything to put the foot pedal in when you get the sewing machine. It comes with a cover, but it doesn't come with anything to put the foot pedal and the plug in. So they fit really nicely in this, and then this slots nicely into the space, the throat of the actual machine, so that when you're putting it all together, it all ties up quite nicely. So that is another one of my top 10 items for your sewing journey. Okay, so the first thing on my top tip list is have a tidy sewing area. So you want your desk to literally just have on it, workspace, whatever it is, you just want to have on it what it is that you're working on. And that's one of the challenges that I have when I am doing the videos for the membership group, because I tend to have like my notepad if I've got to take notes down, or if there's something that I definitely want to mention whilst I'm doing the video. That's kind of in my sewing space, the camera's in the sewing space, and that kind of like goes against my preferred sewing experience, which is to literally just have what I need on the desk that I'm using. So that's how I would recommend for anybody, especially if you're new to sewing. Try and start off like that, rather than if you start a bad habit and then try to unpick that bad habit. So if you're just new to sewing, just try and start now with the good habit of only having on your desk the stuff that you need. Which leads nicely on to question or tip number 2. How do you know what you need? So basically what you need is most of the things that I've just discussed as your top 10. So you need the pattern, the fabric, all the bits that you're going to need for the project that you're working on. So make sure you've read through the pattern before you sit down and you've got together all the supplies that you need before you start, because it is really frustrating when you get to a particular point in the pattern and realise that you don't have the bit that you need to do the next step, and you're then stuck and it's 10 o'clock at night and there's no shops open. Somebody needs to invent a 24-hour emergency call-out service for sewers. I actually think that would, and you'd pay a premium for them to deliver it right to your door. But anyway, yeah, that is really annoying. So make sure that you have looked at your pattern, made sure you've got everything you need for the project before you start. So that is top tip number 2. And included in those things that you need will be the scissors, the pins, the scrap bag, the needles, etc, etc. So refer back to top 10. My top tip number 3 is be realistic about how long it's going to take you to make it. It always takes longer than you think. It is very, very rare that whatever it is that you're going to make is done quicker than you think it's going to take. And I think it's quite good if you can break it down into stages. So quite often if I'm making things, so if I'm making clothes, for example, I haven't made any for a while, but I made a couple of items towards the end of last year, or January I think it was, and I cut out all the pieces. I think I was making 2 things, so I actually cut out both items and batch cut them out, and then it was a case of when I get time I can literally just set up the sewing machine and I'm ready to sew them. So almost treat it like 2 different stages. There's the cutting out stage, and then there's the sewing it together stage, and be realistic about how long that's going to take. So if you've only got an hour to make something, it might be a case of you need to say to yourself, right, well, I'm going to use that hour and get the stuff cut out, and then I will schedule in another hour and another day to get it sewn together. And I think that way it's less frustrating, and it also then gives you something to look forward to in your calendar in the week ahead if you're really busy about when you're going to get to do something creative built into your calendar. So yeah, be realistic about how long things are going to take, because it's really frustrating if you're starting to run out of time, or you've got to be somewhere and you've not finished what it is that you're making, and you're really in a good, you're in a good place, everything's going well, the seam ripper's not been used for ages, but you've then got to go and do something else. So think about it and try and block the time out according to what it is that you've got to do. Step 4 or 5, I love a planner and a notebook, which won't be a surprise to a lot of people. And my advice to you or tip to you is take notes. So regardless of what it is that you're making, take notes, whether it's a new technique that you've learned, or refresher on something else, or it could just literally be something along the lines of you just had this light bulb moment that zips aren't as hard as you thought they were, because you've now done 3 or 4 and you've kind of faced that fear. And you can actually make a note of that, and then when you look back in your planner or your journal or your notebook or whatever it is, you can see how your sewing journey has progressed and how your confidence is growing, because crafting creates confidence. I really do believe that, and it just gives you a boost, and to be able to actually track that in writing if you're having like a day where things aren't going well, which happens to everybody, you can actually look back and go, well, hang on a minute, I'm a lot further forward than I was 3 months ago or 6 months ago or whatever it was. So what I tend to do is I have a couple of options. I've got a notebook, which I covered, and it's one of the projects out of the membership boxes, or you can just buy the pattern on the website, or you can buy it as a box with the fabric in it, not this fabric, but fabric in it. So this is literally just a notebook. So this is what I dish out to all my new sewing students. They get an empty notebook, they get some printed cutouts to stick in, and basically that's startup supplies, the skills we're going to learn, and then a list of the projects that we're going to make as part of the Sew Like a Pro workshops. And then I encourage them to index the first couple of pages, and then they stick in their projects, the patterns, and I encourage them to write their own notes, and it means that they can look back on that to see how they've progressed. So that is one suggestion. My other suggestion is I designed a project book, Make It Sew's project book, because I do more than just sewing, and a lot of the project books out there were for specific standalone crafts. And because I dip in and out of a lot of them, I wanted to have them all in one place. So I designed this, and this has basically got like a planner in the front of what you're going to do for the year, or you can use it to record what you actually did instead of what you hope to do. And then you've got a list of unfinished projects, works in progress, and then after that is a double page for each item, and it's got details in there of when you started it, when you finished it, what the project was, where the pattern came from, what materials you needed, a picture, space for a picture, space for the fabrics used or the wool or the thread, and space for thoughts and lessons learned. Would you make it again? And then this page is like just a square paper page for you to write down any additional thoughts or to do a drawing or a graph or whatever. So I would encourage you to do either of those two options, because as I've already said, it helps you to either capture new things that you have learned, and to be able to track your journey. So for example, in my own sewing book, so this is my Sew Like a Pro specific notebook, but I've got a separate one that I use for my sewing machines specifically. So when I figured out how to do something new on my sewing machine, because let me just side tangent, every sewer is always learning. There's always something new to learn when you're sewing. You never get to a point where you know everything, because there's always another technique to try or a different material to use. So every day is a school day when you sew, regardless of how far along you are in the sewing journey. Okay, so I have got a separate notebook for my sewing machines because they change as well. So I think I'm on about my 4th or 5th sewing machine since I started doing sewing as a job. And I've also got a cover stitch machine, which I don't use a massive amount. So I've written down clear instructions to myself of how to get started with that, so that I know I can just go straight to that, and as soon as I read it, I kind of go, all right, yeah, that's how you do that. So that's something that's really useful. So for example, a lot of the sewing machines default, so the ones that I have used recently are mainly Genome. It defaults to your needle position is in the middle, which is 3.5, which is fine, but the actual stitch length defaults to 2.2, and you might not want your stitch length to be 2.2, you might want it to be significantly bigger than that. So it's being aware that you need to remember to change it when you switch it on, and how to do it, because all the machines are different. So that's why it's really important to take your own notes and to be able to find those easily. So try and keep them all in one place. And my final top 5 item is know when to walk away. So we all have frustrating sewing sessions. Regardless, going back to my previous point, regardless of how experienced you are, we all have days where it's just not happening. And that can be for lots of different reasons. So again, it could be you need to change your needle. So if there's a problem with your machine, the kind of golden rule of thumb is take the bobbin thread out, take the top thread out, rethread both of them, try it again. If it still doesn't work, change your needle. And then if that doesn't work, you need to dig a little bit deeper. But they're kind of like your top three. So kind of like when you have a new baby and you need to check, do they need burped? Do you know, they need the nappy changed? Are they hungry? That kind of thing. So they're kind of like your top three key things that you need to check. So it could be as simple as that. However, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's 11:30 at night. You've been sewing for a couple of hours. You're 4 glasses of wine in, and suddenly things are not going to plan. So my advice at that point is just switch the machine off and then go back to it again the next day. And you will actually save yourself so much time in the long run. My other bit of advice here about walking away is, and we've all done it, I'm sure, and what I'm saying to you is, it's easier just to unpick it. But you know, sometimes if you've sewn 2 bits of fabric together, especially if there's wadding involved, right? You're sewing 2 pieces of fabric together and they're both got wadding on the back, and you open it up and one of those pieces of fabric hasn't caught. It's just sticking out a little bit. At that point, just unpick it. I don't know how many times I have thought, well, if I just go over it again, a little bit further in, it'll be fine. You go over it again, you open it up, and it didn't work. So you've now got 2 rows of stitches to unpick. So just don't do it. Just accept from the first error, just unpick it. Okay, so do what's right, not what's easy, because quite often what's easy is going to end up taking you longer to fix in the long run. So that is my final of my top 5 tips, which is know when to walk away. So if you're 4 glasses of wine in and things are now not going well, just switch it off and come back to it tomorrow. If it's just frustrating you and you've unpicked it 25 million times, maybe it's just time to just go and have a cup of tea, or leave it till tomorrow and come and look at it again with a fresh pair of eyes. It is surprising how often my machine is playing up, and then I literally switch the whole thing off, come back to it the next day, and you would never know that there had been a problem. So it's one of the mysteries of sewing. So anyway, that is my top 5. They're my top 10 sewing items and top 5 sewing top tips. I hope that you found that useful. I would love to know what yours are. What are your top 10 go-to items? Are they the same as mine? What else would you add to the list or switch out of the list? And what are your tops? Do my top 5 tips make sense? Do you agree with them? Do you have different ones? Do you think, oh my goodness, that is such good advice, I'm definitely going to try that? I would love to hear what your thoughts are. So that's it for today. I'm pretty sure, because I've stopped and started the video several times, I don't actually know how long it's been running for, so I'm going to go with, it's been running long enough. I'll do my advent calendar in my own time, and I'll let you guys go and enjoy the rest of your day, and I will speak to you all again next week. So thank you for watching Tea with Fee, and I will see you next week. And don't forget, I'm rooting for you from Make It Sew HQ.